Hello, everyone. Let's go and get started. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm very excited about this session because this sustainability topic is extremely important for long-term CPQ ROI, and as we heard this morning, also leading into continuing your digital transformation journey. So, with that, our panelists represent key facets of the industry. We have our analysts, and we have both mature and new CPQ implementations. So let's meet them. Frank, let's start with you.
Yeah, my name is Frank Sohn, and I have worked in the configure price quote area now since '96. Started off at that time with SAP, and I'm based out of Fort Collins, Colorado, but I also lived here 10 years in the Bay Area in Half Moon Bay, so happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Amjad?
Hi, my name is Amjad Chaudhry. I'm the product owner for CPQ and CRM. I work for Boral Australia. It's an Australian company, one of the largest construction materials and building products company. We just implemented CPQ about 6 months ago, so we are one of the new customers of Apttus.
Awesome. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Keim. I work for WageWorks. We are the leading consumer directed benefit provider. Basically, those are products where your employees can defer pre-tax money to use for out-of-pocket health care and commuter expenses. I have been a Salesforce administrator for about 10 years, and recently we just implemented CPQ, and I've been the sole CPQ administrator.
Solo admin, yeah. So Frank, why don't you go ahead and tell us your view as to how CPQ projects are different?
Yeah. So I think there are basically three different things. Otherwise, it's similar to other projects that you do, which impact a lot of your functionality, right? So, but the first one is it's an ongoing effort. It's not a project where you go ahead, you plan it, and then you execute it, and then you go and forget about it, basically, right? It's an ongoing maintenance project because you will have new products that need to be implemented. You will have new services that need to be added. Your prices will change. Your quote forms will change and stuff like that, right? So it's an ongoing maintenance. That's the first difference. The second difference is really that you touch a lot of different functional teams, so which doesn't make it any easier, right? So you have sales operations, marketing, product management, legal, finance, IT, to name just these teams, right? So it's already 7 or 8 teams that you have to deal with. So that makes it hard because you have to engage all of them early on and make sure that you get the business requirements from them and make sure they agree on different objectives. And then it's also the last thing I think is you cannot just do what you do today and use it to a new tool, right? So that has been done for a long time. That was done with ERP systems. That's also still done with CPQ systems. But I think if you really want to see different results, you also have to look at the processes, right? You should do that before you start selecting a vendor. So I think that's where the CPQ project is really different in these 3 areas.
Awesome, thank you, Frank. So just digging in a little bit more, why do you feel like basically the pillars of design, governance, and training are so important?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is really you have to prepare for a CPQ project, right? So that means you have to take a little bit of time to make sure you're selecting the right product for you. So keep in mind there are over 100 different CPQ solutions out there. They all have different specializations. Yes, they do basic product configuration, pricing, and quoting, but they have different capabilities in different areas. So therefore, you should spend some time on making sure that you select the right solution. It's not a 6-month project to don't scare anyone, right? So, but you should spend some time, because I think I told that earlier to someone, you spend probably 8 hours just to find the right smartphone, and that's at most $1,300. And now you're talking about a solution that costs potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. You should spend some time to make sure you're getting the right one. You also need to prepare for CPQ implementation. It's not just selecting the right tool and then waiting until your system implementer comes. You should prepare for it. So use the time wisely between when you sign for the software product and then when the implementation team comes on site, because there are many things you can do to make it more effective. Then the next thing is once you're up and running, you have installed your solution or you have implemented it, you have to maintain it. There's still ongoing change management, and that's just because you have so many different teams involved. Somebody probably has some challenges with some changes that you want to do, so it's an ongoing change management effort. You need to get all these teams engaged. you also should make sure that the solution provider, system integrator, and your internal teams have a good chemistry between each other, because they will work on an ongoing basis with each other. And then last but not least, you should make sure that everyone is trained and that you keep your eyes open for additional developments. I just met with the CPQ team here this morning to look at the latest developments, and there are so many changes in all the different solutions in this area. You have to make sure that you have ongoing training to keep up to date, because things are changing very fast and it's only accelerating. It's not getting any slower.
That's awesome. So now let's dig into the implementation side a little bit. What were, Amjad and Lisa, what were some of your guiding principles for when you were doing your implementations? Amjad, let's start with you.
The most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, or for our project, was start with the end in mind. And it's not just about the technical solution we're going to deliver. Make sure you have the business objective in mind. That is very, very important, and it's important to actually document it in the business case document that you prepare, and make sure that you have a complete alignment on that. That is going to help you a lot. That helped us a lot. Hopefully it helps you as well in the stages when you start implementing and you have to prioritize certain functionalities over the others. So you will always have that thing to go back to. Does it really help me in meeting my business objectives? It also makes securing funding for the project a bit easier. And it also makes you think about the processes and any organization impacts that's going to have. So keep the end in mind, not just from a technical perspective, from a business objective perspective as well. The second thing that I think it's pretty important is talk to the users, and not just the sales users who are going to configure price and quote. We just implemented CPQ. We have not done CLM or the billing piece yet. Talk to the users, not just the sales users, but people who are going to approve those quotes if you have approval processes in place. If call center people are going to be involved, involve them as well. If they need to convert quote into orders, if that's the process that's relevant for you. Talk to the sponsors of the projects, generally the business lead of the organization where the tool is going to be used should be the key sponsor, and that's the most important person you should talk to. Involve them upfront, make sure that they are being listened to. That structure is going to help. It has helped us a lot in terms of buy-in once we go to the subsequent stages. And the last thing I would say very quickly is make sure that the overall, the tool that you've selected or implementing just is in line with overall IT architecture of your company. It can integrate well, and it is fit for future as well.
Awesome, thank you. Lisa?
I think for us, we spent a lot of time defining what our problem was and documenting our business processes. We didn't really have a clear picture of all the steps in our process. And so we discovered a lot more problems with our process as we documented it. So we were in the process of implementing a new ERP. Oops. So we needed to create a sustainable order-to-cash process where we could send pricing with SKU information from Salesforce into our ERP. So we spent a lot of time analyzing our process, our sales process, finding all of the holes, and documenting everything.
Awesome, thank you. So from you guys' perspective, the whole panel, what are some ways to manage business process design overall, and then any subsequent changes to it? Frank?
So the first thing that you should look at, right, is before you select a solution, you need to know what kind of issue are you actually trying to solve, right? So because it's not just because someone else is doing it, it may be the right for you, right? So it's like, yeah, you're trying to reduce the time you offer a quote, you're trying to get the better margin and stuff like that. So in order to do that, you would need to gather the business requirements from the different teams that I mentioned earlier. So what I still see very often is that the sales team is getting asked, maybe the sales operations team and the IT team, but you're not engaging the other teams, right? So, and then you're going forward with the whole thing just to find out at the later point, hey, I wasn't asked, I'm against this, right? So this is something that's very good to do that early on. Make sure that you get the business requirements or user stories. Another point I want to mention here is what I still see very often is you have 1,500 requirements because everyone, it was so easy to have a user story. I'm, as a user of this, do this, And then you have someone who's sitting there, obviously, for an hour and just writing stuff. So you have to prioritize this, right? So, and there has to be some reason behind it, why something is high and why something should get done. And it cannot be 80% of the 1,500 requirements which are high, right? So that should be understood. You also should look at the budget, because what I see is if you have very different implementations. If I only use 15 people, I probably have a different budget as if when I want to use 3,000 sales reps. So you should understand what your budget requirements are, what your limitations are from an infrastructure. So you probably have a CRM system, you have an ERP system, enterprise resource planning or order management system, and that already will dictate potentially what solutions work best for you. So you should look at this as well. And then when you go to the selection process, that doesn't need to be a process that takes forever. It should, I have no idea, I cannot give you a hard time. It should be somewhere, from my point of view, in most cases, between a week and 12 weeks. And what you want to do there is you want to address exactly what I said. You form a selection committee, so which people make the decision about the solution, right? Do they have all the information? Do they have the priorities? Do they know how they measure if this whole exercise was successful? And then you go ahead, you invite the vendors at that point, because now you know what you want. Now you can actually score who is doing something better, and you can ask them for a customized approach, right? And I think then afterwards you make the decision, you go ahead, you implement it. So, and that is, I think, the next point where you would actually say, now that you know which solution you want, now it's not time to sit here and wait until somebody comes on site, because if somebody comes on site, they have X number of people who want to work on day one. You should be prepared. You should be able to give them something at hand and say, hey, this is the information I gathered. And you don't need to gather all the information, but you need to gather enough so that you stay one step ahead of your system implementer, so that you can give them enough work so that they can get started and can start being effective.
Awesome, thank you. Amjad?
Building on Frank's point, I think prioritization of user stories and requirement is the key. We had a long list of requirements. In our MVP, or the minimum viable product, we went with somewhere between 1/3 to 1/4 of those requirements. Keep in mind, if CPQ tool is new to your company, people would actually not know what their requirements are until they see a prototype or a demo. So we took a very agile approach. Apttus was fantastic in terms of helping us to deliver the solution for one particular geography and one business in our complete business in 6 to 8 weeks. In 8 weeks, we had a working product in hands of the users. Then they gave us real feedback. Because before that, they were writing user story as a user, I want to create a quote. That's a nice user story, but what do you do with it? They don't know what Apttus can deliver or any other vendor can deliver. They have not seen the screens. Only when they see the screens and when you demo to them. And we were actually demoing the screens to them every week. We had a showcase with the users, so we'll call in 2 sales users, 1 sales admin person, 1 GM sales who's going to approve the quotes, and we'll show them this is what it is. They will say, oh, they will tell you small things. This quote start date and end date, why are they, one is above the other, they should be this way. These are very small things to manage, very small drag and drop kind of things in configuration. But if you involve them, again, you are making sure they will use the product. And also, you keep in mind, do not spend endless time in finalizing the requirements. I think 2-3 days a week is enough. You have limited budgets. I would rather spend more time in building and demoing, and then actually they realize. Because we had built some things, only after building them, we realized we actually did not need them. And then, and if we had spent 6-8 weeks just requirement analysis and entered an analysis paralysis stage, I think we would have lost that time, which actually we spent building the product. So that's my key input here, and I think this agile approach really works well. We have a long list of backlog items, but then every 2 weeks we bring new enhancements, we build a few things, we release them, we stay in the news, the business stays excited, and whenever the requirements are not in line or not working towards meeting the business objectives, the standard answer is is going to be a low priority item. It's a nice to have, but it's really not adding to the business objective. That's why I mentioned the business objective is setting that up is the key.
That was awesome. Key tenets of Agile, absolutely. Lisa?
We didn't have a lot of user engagement in our selection process, but we did have the core members of the team that does the administration for Salesforce and for CPQ involved. And I don't know about you guys, but when I first saw CPQ, it was a little overwhelming. There was a lot going on. I wasn't at all familiar with that type of software, so it was a little daunting to try to make those evaluations and those decisions. So what we decided to do is we broke up the application into different pieces, and each person sort of evaluated a specific part of the functionality so that they can kind of focus on that area. So one person focused on renewals, and another person focused on catalog and pricing, and another person focused on terminations. So it was just a little easier to kind of take in all the information and be able to make good decisions.
That's awesome. Okay. So tell us about some ways that you guys have both seen and or done, in Amjad and Lisa's case, change management and ongoing governance. Frank?
Okay, so from my point of view, I think the change management, I mentioned this earlier, is an ongoing effort, right? So because you will still have changes, you will still have all these different teams to deal with. And the only thing I want to say here is I would assign a senior person internally who has good connections to the leadership team, because they will need to get the leadership team updated. They need to get buy-in. They need to make sure that they have the resource available. Very often I see that people try to make a shortcut in the beginning because change management doesn't seem that important, and you try to have someone junior, and then you wonder at the end why you don't get anything achieved, right? It's not because of a lack of trying. It's just you need to have certain relationships that work and that you get the communication through the system very quickly. So that's one thing I would mention. Also in a live environment where you say, okay, there's an ongoing effort, you should dedicate someone. It's not the 100% position, obviously, right? But it should be someone senior who is doing that. And then the team engagement, I think you have to think about options, how you get your teams involved so that everyone stays up to date and is not feeling overlooked with these different requirements. Again, that depends on your requirements, how much effort is needed, but I think it's an ongoing effort, and it should require a minimum amount per week or bi-weekly where you sit together or provide some kind of update that everyone stays bought into this whole approach. Because not everyone will use the solution, even if you think it's perfect, you have developed it and try to convince even the last sales rep to use it, they may not, right? So.
They can be stubborn. Yes, I agree. Amjad, thank you, Frank.
Look, I think this is the most underestimated area where we fail. We don't. I've seen many projects where not enough or not the right quality of resources were assigned to this. You may build a fantastic solution, deliver a fantastic product, but if change management is not proper, it will fail. So adding to Frank's point, get a senior person, and if it's a significant enough project for you, get a dedicated person during the project phase and for some time after the implementation. There is going to be resistance. You will probably deliver 1/3, 1/2 of the user stories. So manage this very, very well. And this person, the change manager of your project, should be involved from the very start. It should not be an afterthought that, oh, now that we have almost done and we're going to go talk to the big number of users. By that time, if people don't feel involved, things go out. Once you start developing something in an organization, in a big organization, gossip starts, and people may already make their impressions, oh, they're going to throw a CPQ tool on us. And they're going to take away the thing that we really love working with. If you don't address that upfront when you're kicking off the project, start from that time period. So don't underestimate this one. The other thing that I think most people, or at least we underestimated, was the data cleanup that was required. If there's crappy data in your CRM system about accounts and some other information that you're using in the tool that CPQ builds on, that also people sometimes think it's a problem with the tool, but the problem is actually with the data. And since the data is not clean enough, you see duplicates, you see all the standard type of problems. So I would again underline it, do not estimate the change management effort, get a good resource and get a dedicated resource. Obviously it depends on the size of the project, if you can afford it or not, but it's critical.
Awesome, thank you. Lisa?
So I can speak to the team engagement piece and the ongoing resource. So I actually was the ongoing resource. I'm the person who administers the system and maintains it. So I could suggest that that person be identified at the very beginning and have them involved in the implementation process, if at all possible. It was really helpful for me because I was able to learn the tool. During the implementation, I was able to learn CPQ and build and learn at the same time. Also, it was really important that we negotiated knowledge transfer with our implementation partner. So we had sessions before our project completed where they did official knowledge transfer to members of my team. So we were prepared and ready to go after our go live. And then Apttus training, really important. It was really good. I did the 201 class. That really was very helpful. And also build a relationship with your success manager, your Apttus success manager. They're there to help you.
Awesome, thank you. So now let's talk about some of the most effective training methods that you guys have seen, regardless of type, or type of training. Frank, let's start with you.
Yep, I think especially on ongoing maintenance, what you think about is a product model. What I mean by product model is you're selling your product and they are organized a certain way. So, and that should be consistent across products, across routes to market. When I say route to market, I mean your sales team is selling your products. You may have channel partners who sell your products too, and you maybe even sell your products on e-commerce website, right? So, and maybe you want to have the same experience, maybe you want to have a different experience. You need to talk about this, who is doing this maintenance. Traditionally, this was done by IT, which required communication between a business person who knows what they want to sell, how they want to sell the product. Then they need to communicate to the IT person who implements it, tests it, and the business person approves it before it goes to production, right? Right now, the approach is you let business people do that directly because you simplify the maintenance. So that's something that you should ask as well at the beginning of a project to see how is this maintenance going to work, who is going to work, how many people do I need to do that, how, if I have an emergency, so my product model is not showing, my products are not showing up correctly to my sales reps, who needs to fix it, right? So if you have, for example, your product model maintenance offshored and there's no one available who is doing these emergency changes. So some things you should consider, other things as pricing. So I see more interest in pricing lately, and when I say pricing, is not like just like cost plus and list less. You could also have different pricing strategies, right? So something that seems popular these days is the SaaS pricing, where you have subscription pricing or usage-based pricing and stuff like this. The question is also for you, if these pricing strategies change over time, what do you need to do to update the system to do these changes? Can you do this yourself? Do you have to ask Apttus to come in? Do you have to ask someone else to come in? So it's just important, I think, to go ahead and think about these things ahead of time, product model maintenance as well as pricing maintenance. And then last but not least, obviously the user experience, to say how, what works best for your users, right? So an example could be, as a sales rep, I'm not giving you any help on the screen. I show you all the product attributes and you know what it means, because you got the introductory training when you joined the company for 2 weeks, and now I'm not showing you anything. If I would give you a capability to chat with someone else, it's a different user experience, right? And this is also something where you want to pay attention to see how your sales reps use it, what helps them best to adopt the tool usage.
Awesome, thank you. Amjad?
Don't have a lot of experience in this area because we just went live 4 months ago. I'll tell you what we are doing. We do have a key user, super user model. So one of the salesperson in each geographical and each business location is trained as a key user. And that person is supposed to be the first line of contact in case the other users are struggling. If they don't have the answer, then the issue gets escalated via call center and comes to my team. When we went for the Apttus certification, we did actually invite the call center people, a couple of their representatives from Manila, to attend that training with us, because we want them to be just not taking the calls and getting confused. So we wanted them to be intelligent enough to handle the issues, but also direct them to the right team, because again, we are a big company and issues can get lost, tickets can get lost. So that's something we have done. Before granting access to CPQ or CRM system for any new user, we do have a mandatory online training session. It takes you through screens, and actually it makes you go through a practical example of creating a project opportunity code, and then it has an MCQ type of test at the end, which generally everyone passes because you have so many attempts at it. So the intent is not really to fail people in that, but like get them thinking about the answers, and only if they qualify it, only then their account is activated or created in the system. So we are trying to do this in the best possible way, getting guidance from Apttus, but again, too early for me to say that that's working very well. Once we go through a few pricing cycle changes and everything, only then we would know how effective we were.
Great, thank you. Lisa?
So I think everybody struggles with training. It can be a difficult thing. There's two things that we've learned that have been very helpful. We do a lot of the traditional things where we create process documents for the different processes that go on, and we put them in Salesforce content, and of course, nobody can find them, and people are constantly calling and looking for the documents or not using them, of course. So sales reps are traditionally very impatient, and so we will create just one document that will have all of the links in the document to the different process documents for them. So all they have to do is keep track of one document, and they can find any of the other sets of directions that they need. So we found that really helps. The other thing that we've done is when we roll out a large process, we can have anywhere from 100 to 200, 300 people on a session at a time. So we will schedule probably 3 or 4 different sessions of the exact same thing, so that we can make sure that at least everyone will be able to get to a session. We try to make managers make it mandatory, which sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But then what we do is, after we're done with our initial rollout, we have a 6 weeks, maybe 8-week period where we'll have weekly refresher trainings, or just sort of touch base trainings, so that people can come if they want to or not come. And that gives them some time to get into the system and find out what their questions are. So then they will come and they will actually ask questions. It also gives us a chance to kind of address some of those 20% edge case scenarios that might kind of derail your regular training, that you want to kind of stay away from, because most people are never going to encounter those types of quotes or deals. So it gives you the opportunity to kind of go through some of those harder, more difficult questions that people have.
Awesome. I love that. So we've got a minute left. So Frank, I know we're going to talk about this, but I think really the key points here are just, there's change, just as Frank talked about in the beginning of the session. It's changing. The industry's changing, right? We have, X as a service, right? So just keep in mind, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's visualization, you just need to keep on top of what's happening in the industry and with market developments. And of course, Frank and his website at Nova CPQ is a great way to do that. And of course, we're available for contact, et cetera. But just where to go from here, right? Just stay curious. Just keep learning, right? It's a journey, just like we heard this morning in the keynote, right? This is a journey. This isn't an end point. You just have to keep going. I mean, I've implemented multiple CPQs, of course, including Apttus. And it is. I mean, it doesn't change. It doesn't stand still. Neither do your processes, nor should they, right? So anyway, just we have some resources here down at the bottom to learn more about CPQ, including Frank's. He's got a podcast that's actually very interesting. Gartner, Forrester, et cetera. Business review sites like Trust Radius, excellent third-party, independent sites that you can take a look at. And then here's their contact information. These slides will be available to you after the conference. I can't tell you when, because I don't know. But I am, you can contact me and I can get either whatever information you need or whatever the case may be. But thank you everyone for coming. And I do think this is an important topic, and thank you for your time, and thank you to our panelists. You guys are awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.